All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today for what will be a very special session. This is our 10th in our Sochology Edu series, and the first time we're having or we've had someone from our friends in engineering. So, as PMs, we work very closely with engineers. I'd say we're pretty much tied at the hip. It'll be great to better understand product management challenges from an engineering perspective. My name is Mudassar Bungish, and I'll be your host. And we also have Amna with us today, who is our technical director for this session. So, just some housekeeping before we get started. Please mute yourself during the session. We also love getting questions, so please type them into the chat and we'll bring them up during and towards the end of the session. So, thank you. Our topic for today is being technical as a product manager. And this is something that comes up quite often when people are exploring product management or looking to move into another opportunity within product management. So, how technical do you need to be in order to succeed? Do you need to know how to program? Will my engineering team make fun of me for not knowing what a primary key is? So just kidding. So to speak to that topic, we're excited to have Zeeshan Syed join us today. Zeeshan is a senior software developer at Getty Images, and over the past decade, he's built products that have supported more than 1 million users. After seeing how some of his non-technical coworkers were struggling to engage in conversations with developers, he's taken on the noble task to teach product managers how to master the technology behind Web 2.0 so they can build successful products. He's also the founder at Tech Talk for non-developers and an instructor at Next Leap. You can follow Zeeshan on LinkedIn or TikTok for practical tech content. Thank you, Zeeshan, for joining us today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome. Excuse me. Thanks so much, Melissa. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Amna, as well for hosting me. Product Soch actually has like a pretty special place in my heart. I didn't mention this before, but about a year ago or so, when I first started posting content, I think it was Syed who actually tagged me in a Product Soch post saying that I was, one of a few people in product to actually follow, given the content that I was posting. And from there, my audience, my following count just kind of like exploded, and I started getting a lot more people, a lot more traction. So Product Soch, as I mentioned, has a very special place in my heart. So I'm really honored to be able to speak here, and just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity. So welcome everyone to to the Being Technical as a Product Manager talk. I just want to get a quick sense of where everyone is calling in from. I'm not going to wait for everyone to give the responses, but feel free to add that inside the chat. I would love to know where everyone is calling from. It would be great to know. And feel free to ask as many questions as possible. I'll try and answer them during the talk, but if not, I'll do my best to answer them at the very end. So that would be great. All right, let's jump right into this. So who am I? My name is Zeeshan Syed, as mentioned. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I'm a senior software engineer at Getty Images. So I'm not a product manager. So I know it seems like I have a lot of nerve to tell product managers what they should be doing, but I am a software engineer. I've worked very closely with a lot of product managers myself, and I've noticed a few things throughout my career that I feel like I can help in the product community. So I'm a content creator as well as an educator, and I'm the creator of Tech Talk for Non-Developers, which is an online course that teaches product managers and non-technical professionals what it is that developers do, like the A to Z of application development, without ever having to write a line of code. So my story started a couple of years back. I was sitting in a morning stand-up, which I'm sure many of you have been doing throughout your career. I was sitting in a morning stand-up with a bunch of my developer colleagues, and there were two product managers there. One of them has been part of the company and the team for a little while. The other one was actually fairly new to the company. And I looked over at her, and it looked like she was sweating buckets. It looked like she was like on edge. She was quickly writing down notes, and she looked like she was pretty uneasy. So afterwards, I approached her and I said, "Hey, Ruby, is everything okay? You look like you're a bit on edge." And she said to me something that to this day has stuck with me. She said, "I have no idea what you people are talking about." And from there, like when she was saying "you people," she was referring to us developers, because we were talking tech. And I said, okay, what is it that didn't make any sense? So she asked me, like, what is pushing? What is pulling? What is production? What is an environment? What is master? What is this? What is that? So I decided to have a 30-minute conversation with her and just explain to her what version control was, because that's what we were talking about during the morning stand-up. We were talking about where where some of the features were as far as like the versioning was concerned. So I just pulled out my notebook and started doodling on my notebook and drawing out what version control was, so at least she could follow along. And by the end of that conversation, she said to me, "Wow, this is really helpful. I feel like a lot of other product managers could actually benefit from this." So that one-on-one conversation transitioned into me mentoring 4 other product managers at that company. And from there, I actually started having conversations with product managers from like every big tech company you can think of, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple. And pretty much every single one of them said to me the exact same thing. You do not need to know how to code as a product manager. That's the first thing. But having some level of technical understanding does actually help you in your day-to-day. So I decided to create a course called Tech Talk for Non-Developers, where, again, I teach the A to Z of app development without ever writing a single line of code. Completely animated, self-paced course that has gained quite a bit of traction over the past year or so. So how do I work, and what do I do exactly? Well, I post content for technical content for product managers based on whatever it is that my audience tells me they want to learn about. So sometimes it's cheat sheets for REST APIs. Sometimes it's what is a load balancer. Sometimes it's cheat sheets for version control. These are all things that I post, and from there, people go to my go to my LinkedIn. If they like what they see on my LinkedIn profile, they go to my website. And if they like my website, then they go to my they enroll in my course. I don't do any outbound marketing. I don't slide into people's DMs. I believe in a very organic way of marketing yourself. So this is my approach, and so far it's been working out very, very well. So to date, I have over 500 product managers, program managers, and technical recruiters who are course, mostly product managers. It's mostly product managers, but there are others who want to take it as well. And I've taught close to about 1,000 product managers during some of my live sessions over the past year or so. So that's the gist of how it is that I work. And if you do want to check out my LinkedIn, you're welcome to do that. I also recently got onto TikTok. I have just about 15,000 followers on LinkedIn. A much smaller following on TikTok because I just recently started that, but I'm not posting dancing videos or bhangra or something like that on TikTok. I'm posting like edu series and short videos that I believe can actually help product managers in their day to day. And I do like to engage with a lot of my audience. I regularly ask the question of if whenever people comment on my posts, I always ask them if there's more things that they would like to learn. And I often get like a list like this from some of my followers. So as someone who is not a product manager, I still have to ask my audience what they're looking for. So I'm kind of doing that, doing what it is that product managers do, but as I build up my product. So hopefully that gives you guys a good understanding of what it is that I do. So why are we having this conversation? It's a very good question. Why are we having this conversation? Because the reason why we're having this conversation is because this is the path that I've seen a lot of non-technical professionals, mostly product managers, take. And ask yourself if this sounds a bit familiar. You land your first role as a product manager. You struggle with the technical lingo. You ask your developers, but you still don't get it. You start reading articles that are way too technical and really just meant for developers. And you start watching YouTube videos that are far too high level for them to ever be practical. And then you start questioning if tech is the right industry for you. I have seen this pattern quite a few times, and I honestly felt like there was a better way for product managers who wanted to learn tech, who felt it was necessary. I felt like there was actually a better way to do that. Because the reality is, and this is something I'm sure many of you have experienced, there is absolutely no technical manual for non-technical product managers offered by any company when you first get your job. The reality is that most companies expect you to either have the knowledge or to just learn on the job. And I think that's a really poor way of actually doing that, because it's just not really effective. It's just not really an effective way of learning, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
All right. So Sorry, I just lost my. Oh, cool, perfect. So, what does it mean? What does being technical mean? What being technical as a product manager mean, or actually mean to a developer? What is like the expectation that developers have? So, hopefully, we're going to be able to answer this question throughout the chat. And I do have a few outcomes I would like for everyone to get out of this conversation. Number one, be able to understand what tech to actually learn as a product manager. Number two, understand what technical knowledge developers expect you to have. And number three, understand how to work and empathize with developers. I know sometimes, when you're speaking to a developer, it sounds like we're from another planet because we speak a very different language. But there is, in my opinion, like a very tried and tested way of working very closely and very well with product managers. With developers. So I do think that there's going to be there's some great ways that you guys, some great things you guys are going to learn in the next few minutes. So why learn tech? So I'm not a product manager, but as someone that is building a product, I have to do customer research. So I've asked quite a few of my colleagues that I've met over the past, or friends I've met on LinkedIn, and product managers that I've met and engaged with, what their thoughts are on why product managers should actually learn tech. So Ankit Goswami, he's a global product lead at Expedia. He's also a good friend of mine. This is what he had to say as far as being learning tech as a product manager. He said, it allowed me to, as a product manager, to understand constraints, opportunities, and trade-offs in the development process, leading to more informed product decisions. In addition, having technical knowledge increased credibility and respect amongst technical team members and stakeholders, enhancing the overall influence in the product development process. So definitely do check out Ankit here. He puts out some great content for product managers. That's what he had to say. And another friend of mine, Ankit Shukla, he's the founder of Hello PM. He put out a really great post recently that I've obviously gained permission to talk about. But he put out a few reasons to why product managers should actually learn or gain some technical competency. Number one, because it does allow you to understand your product well. A PM at Zerodon needs to know how an API works. A PM at YouTube needs to understand how latency works. A PM at Uber needs to understand how GPS works. Reason number two, to be able to empathize with developers, and we'll touch on this throughout our talk. Reason number three, being able to bridge the gap between tech and non-technical folks, helping sales understand limitations. I'm sure many of you have been in situations where the sales team promises something like the Mona Lisa of applications, and by the time it's done, it looks like chicken scratch on a napkin. So I'm sure you guys have seen those kinds of those memes where there's reflecting what it is that he's saying over here.
Yeah,
helping marketing teams understand opportunities. That's really, really important, and helping support teams understand root causes. Reason number four, being able to innovate for your user experience, observe and foresee technology advancements. And if you take a look at some of the largest tech companies in the world, almost every single one of them was able to jump leaps and bounds because they're product managers, or some of the people who are leading the product teams who had some level of technical competency, and were able to foresee where it is the technology was going and what was at their hands. So as far as Ankit is concerned, I mean his view is very simple: more confident with technology, plus working well with techies, plus knowing how tech businesses functions equals a better product manager. So definitely check out Ankit. He puts out some great content over there. This is what he has to say about product managers learning tech. And just some other friends of mine, people that I've met over the past year or so. Artkin, who's a technical program manager at Lyft. Andrew Boker, who's a recent speaker at Product Soch. He's a senior product manager at IBM. Lisa Zane, who's a product manager at Google. This is more or less what they've had to say. Companies expect you to hit the ground running once you're hired, as far as technical knowledge is concerned. More comfortable speaking with senior leadership or clients during demos. When you feel uncomfortable with your technical knowledge, you tend to stumble a lot in meetings. You tend to avoid asking questions or being challenged. And speaking the same language makes your team trust you a lot more. So in my honest experience, when you don't have technical knowledge, it becomes very difficult to understand it's understand like very basic things like where a feature is in, let's say, the development pipeline. Progress meetings are much more difficult to follow if you don't understand the lingo. I've met a lot of product managers who've actually gotten a lot of anxiety leading up to their meeting with their developers because they don't want to look foolish. And be honest with yourself if that's something that you've actually felt. It's not uncommon for misunderstandings to happen because of conflating terminology or lack of clarification. I worked with one product manager at some point who told the director of the company that an upcoming feature was going to be ready to test by the end of the week. But when the director went onto the production environment, the feature wasn't even there. Turns out the feature was actually not on production, but it was on UAT. It was on a completely different environment. But because there was a lack of understanding of what an environment actually is, it ended up being a pretty embarrassing, like turn of events for all of us. So just some points to think about. So here is as far as the history of working with developers is concerned. Developers were often treated like easy bake ovens. Okay, so like we were often like a lot of I guess like non-technical founders and even some product managers, back in like 10 years ago or so, just 10, 12 years ago, they would often think that their magical vision and the requirements plus a developer equals some sort of a working application. And their mentality was that, like we'll put in all of our ingredients into here and then hopefully like we'll end up getting our delicious, our delicious cake. So this is obviously the wrong approach. Now we all know better, but this is obviously the wrong approach to doing to managing a product team. It goes far beyond just telling your developers what to do. You have to understand how it is that they think. And although application development can sort of work like this, where you put in the right ingredients, if you put in the wrong ingredients, obviously you're not going to get what you're expecting. And I don't know if people actually notice this, but I put in a carrot, an onion, a tomato, and a chicken bone, and we ended up getting a cake. So this is kind of what people were actually expecting to work. You put in the wrong ingredients, and you end up getting what you're looking for. At the time, people didn't really know better, but this was my experience in working with non-technical folks. And I cannot tell you how many times people have DM'd me, like friends of mine have DM'd me saying, "Hey, Zeeshan, like this developer screwed me over. I'm out $30,000 and I don't even have a working app." I mean, and when I look at their product development process, there was very little I guess like understanding of what it is that their developers were doing. They were just throwing in their ingredients and hoping something would come out of it. So here are some FAQs, some frequently asked questions I think a lot of you are having. Do you need to know how to code? Simple answer, no. You do not need to know how to code in order to be a good product manager and even work effectively with developers. And here's why I personally believe a lot of product managers and a lot of people should not learn how to code. Very simple. You probably will not be very good at it. Okay, and this is not me saying. I'm not saying this with some sort of malice. I'm not saying this with with some sort of ill intentions. I'm saying this because when you're forced to learn something, you're probably not going to enjoy it. And that's what I've seen a lot of product managers do. They try to learn code because they think they have to, and they force themselves to do it, and it just doesn't really, it doesn't really work well. The other thing is that after learning how to code, it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole and get overwhelmed with everything, because there's just so much that you have to learn. And I've met a lot of junior developers who feel the exact same way, who do know how to code, but I can only imagine how product managers who don't know how to code feel. Like, where do you start? And many people start learning code the wrong way, and they start doing everything wrong. I met someone that was learning HTML and CSS. A product manager who was learning HTML and CSS because they wanted to become an API product manager. And anyone who's been in the industry long enough knows that HTML and CSS has nothing to do with APIs. So there's so much information out there that it's very easy for you to go down the wrong path. And this is why I personally don't think it's really necessary for product managers to learn how to code. And my personal belief, this is a very subjective opinion, but I do believe that being technical is very, very, very different than knowing how to code. And if this doesn't make any sense, hopefully in the next few slides, this will actually make sense. But being technical is very different than knowing how to code. So here's another question that's often asked. How much tech do I need to know? Well, it depends. This is every product manager's favorite answer. How much money does a product manager make? Well, it depends. How many hours do you work in a day? It depends. Will I have a life as a product manager? Well, it kind of depends. So I'm going to give the same answer that product managers give. It always depends. But I'll give a bit more clarity here. As far as how much technical knowledge is concerned, and when I say technical knowledge, I mean the stuff that developers do. Don't learn how to code, but rather learn concepts that are not specific to just one language. Because when you learn concepts, that are not specific to a language, you become very language and framework agnostic. And that's actually a very powerful thing, because now you can hit the ground running at pretty much any tech company, and it doesn't matter which technology it is that developers are using. So as far as the first learning outcome that I mentioned, understand what tech to actually learn. This is what my answer to that would be. Like, learn concepts that are not specific to any programming language. And hopefully in the next slide, this if it isn't clear already, hopefully in the next slide it'll become even more clear. So let's just say, for instance, that you wanted to understand, you wanted to learn about REST APIs. So a REST API can be built using many different languages. Okay, let's just say your development team builds their API in Python. Are you going to now learn Python? Because you can, and you can learn some code and memorize some code, and courtesy of ChatGPT, here's some code that you can memorize. But what happens if, let's just say, your development team chooses to change their backend, their API, and now all of a sudden they're using Ruby? Are you going to learn Ruby now? And the reality is that when you can build an API with quite a few different programming languages, so it doesn't make sense to learn all of these different programming languages, and even how to how to build a REST API using these languages. But remember how I said in the beginning, as a PM learning tech, learn concepts that aren't specific to just one language. So instead of learning the syntax for how to build a REST API in Python or Node.js or Ruby or Java, instead of learning the syntax, why not learn what a REST API actually is and understand the important components of a REST API. So learn about what a request is, what a response is, what a payload is, what a query string is, a status code, a method, an endpoint. These are things that are specific to REST APIs, but they're not specific to any programming language. So when you learn these things, like these things I've listed over here regarding REST APIs, it won't even matter which programming language it is that your developers are using. You've already gained like the foundations of what of a REST API. So you can be thrown to any development team, and you'll still be able to understand what the developers are actually talking about. So. So yeah, these are the things that are listed over here. These are the things that make up a REST API, regardless of which language the API is made in. So don't learn the syntax for how to make a request for data using Python. Rather, learn what a request actually is and learn the actual concepts around REST APIs. Because again, as the technology changes, it doesn't even matter to you. Because the concepts that REST APIs revolve around, they will stay the same regardless of which language your developers use. And here's the unfortunate reality. You can learn Python, Ruby, Java, and all these languages as a PM if you really want to, but no developer will ever expect you to know it. And I've never actually asked any of my product managers to know if they knew any of these languages. I've never come across that kind of a situation. Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind there. However, remember how I said, learning how to code is different than being technical. So learning this syntax and this syntax to make an API request in these languages, that will teach you how to code. But learning the steps involved each time an API request is made, regardless of the language used, that's what makes you technical. And that's what allows you to gain transferable technical skills. And that, to me, and again, based on like the people that I spoke to, that is a far more powerful tool for developers, for product managers, rather than just learning how to code.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
and
Zeeshan, I was just going to
once,
say this is yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that once you understand the concepts, from there, if you want to actually learn how to code, you'll already have a strong foundation. If you want to learn how to code, you already have a strong foundation built on top of that. And this is actually how developers learn how to code. We learn concepts first and then translate that into code. But you can just chop off the learning how to code and just learn the concepts first.
Awesome.
Sorry, Melissa, if you want to say something. You
No,
want to say something?
yeah, I was just going to say this is a great example, right? And to your point, I think you should constantly question yourself, like, what is the value that I would provide the product if I learn Python or if I learn Ruby? Am I going to actually sit down with one of my engineers and code or go through review their code? Probably not,
Yeah.
right? So to your point, I think it's a great point. Is learning the concept allows you to. I think the 2 points that you mentioned from the previous folks, build credibility with your team, right? And then know what your constraints are for your product and build your product, right? So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, going back to the first, the learning outcome that I mentioned in the previous slide, learning what it is that, understanding what technology what tech to actually learn. I would say, again, learn the concepts. Don't focus too much on, or don't spend a lot of time on learning how to code, or don't even spend any time, rather. Just learn the concepts there. So as far as technical terms for product managers are concerned, the knowledge required for the technical knowledge required for a product manager will obviously vary depending on what type of PM you actually are. But this is a list of terms that I believe PMs that work closely with developers and who want to gain a strong foundation on tech should actually learn. And remember, none of these terms over here are specific to any programming language. So I'm going to go through these terms pretty quickly since we are a bit short on time. But if I do actually post quite a bit of content on these terms, so like if the terms I'm about to mention, so if something isn't clear, then feel free to check out some of my content there, or perhaps I can explain it a bit better later on. So the first thing would be client-server relationships. And in simple terms, a client makes a request for data to a server, and the server sends back a response to the client indicating what the data is. And this is actually like the foundation of legitimately every single application out there, like client-server relationships. So it's a pretty common thing that will come up in developer meetings. You may not have to necessarily engage in this kind of conversation, but if you want to know what people are talking about, it's a good place to actually start. APIs, or rather REST APIs. This is the fancy buzzword everyone loves to throw around. In simple terms, an API or REST API is an interface that the client will use to get data from the server. So this is the interface the client will use to get data from the server. Again, like I do post quite a bit of content on what a REST API is. So definitely do check that out. Environments. An environment is a sandbox that has all the things your product needs to run. Like if your application requires a server, like a web server, a database server, a caching server, all those will be connected to one another, and that will be considered an environment. You can have multiple environments for different purposes. So your application is going to be going through different environments depending on the stage that it's in. So one environment would be obviously for production, meaning like that's what your users would use. Another environment will be for, let's say, testing, or maybe external testing. You can have different environments set up for those purposes. So it's important to know what an environment is. Backend versus front end. Very simply put, backend is the stuff that you don't see. Front end is the stuff that you do see. So the reason why this is actually pretty important is because when you're working with developers and you have a feature request coming in, or you're allocating resources for your team, it's important to know what every developer actually does. Not every developer will build an API. Some will only consume the API. So that's those are just things to be able to differentiate. Databases, this is where this is where your data for your application is stored. And I'm actually going to touch on this a little bit later on. I do have some opinions on databases as far as product managers are concerned. So I'll touch on that a bit later on. Version control, this is actually where it kind of all started for me. But version control version control allows the developers to isolate code until it's ready for use. It allows for team collaboration and knowing which version of your app is being used by your users. This is also pretty important. And where a feature is in terms of its readiness. This is what version control allows you to do. And lastly here, this is a bit of somewhat of a controversial one, Chrome developer tools. Chrome developer tools, although it is in fact a developer tool, it's really just an extension for Google Chrome that allows you to see how your web application works. It's kind of like popping the hood of your car. There obviously are going to be things in there in Chrome developer tools that are not really that useful to product managers, but it does actually help when you're let's say reporting bugs to your development team. It can actually help them speed up some of their work. So I will touch a bit on this. All these things over here are again, all these terms over here and concepts are things that I actually do touch. I do post quite a bit of content on, and I go into quite a bit of depth as well in my course. But this is certainly not an exhaustive list, and perhaps this is not all these terms are things that every product manager on this call feels like they need to know. But I've been asked this question quite a few times, so I just wanted to give like my personal opinion on what I feel like what I feel like product managers should learn as far as technical terms and concepts. So it's almost guaranteed that at least one or two of these will have to come up during one of your development meetings. So always good to have your to be prepared there. So as far as the second learning outcome is concerned, understand what technical knowledge developers expect you to have. Again, this is like not an exhaustive list, but a decent list for where you can start. And once you build like a foundation on some of these on some of these terms, it's easy to build on top of that. And again, it's easy to hit the ground running at pretty much any a tech company or tech team you end up working on. So it's definitely something to check out. So there's that. These are the tech terms. If somebody wants to, take a screenshot, if you haven't already, feel free to do that. So now I'm going to jump into tips for working with developers, and this is going to touch on the last learning outcome, understanding how to work and empathize with developers. Some of these are things that perhaps some of you have already are aware of. Maybe there's some new things that you'll learn as well. But I wanted to share my experience from what I've seen work pretty well on technical teams that I think product managers can actually introduce. So I'm actually basing I'm actually basing a lot of this stuff during my time at Getty Images. So we do actually work on a development team of 15 developers. And we have 3 apps that we all manage. So we have 15 developers and 3 sub teams that we're kind of working across. And usually we only have people are not spread across different teams, but we do have three apps and three sub teams that each of which manage a certain app. So tip number 1 is having effective morning stand-ups. So again, the images, when we have our stand-ups, we have our stand-up with all 15 of our developers. Everyone gets a chance to talk about what they're working on, if there's any blockers, any bugs. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have an additional huddle right after stand-up that our respective sub teams are able to have. And these are not mandatory huddles. Like if during the stand-up we realize that there's no blockers or anything, or nothing has to really be discussed further, then there's no point in having an additional meeting for that. But when you're working on a large team, it does help to have everyone together and then break everyone apart. So at least you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you understand what other people are working on, and then you get that closer time, the intimate time with your own team as well. So that's how we do that. And occasionally, in our case, we do have 3 or 4 senior developers that work across multiple sub teams. Because there is some work. It's very common for work to actually be siloed and knowledge to be siloed, but I'll get into that in just a bit. But regarding the morning stand-ups, I know a lot of product managers like to complain about having way too many meetings, and obviously there's some truth to that. But collaborations for developers is pretty important, and sometimes it does actually have there's some benefit to being able to have like another meeting, a meeting after one meeting, so you can at least dive deeper and maybe have some one-on-one time if needed. So that is tip number one. Can we possibly get the slides? Yes, absolutely. Cool. So tip number two, I did briefly touch on this, de-siloing work. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of development teams, the knowledge is actually siloed off, and this is and because the knowledge is not always shared, and this is very, very common amongst almost every development team I've worked on. There's always once the team gets very large and the application gets very large and the system gets very large, it's not uncommon for only like 3 or 4 people to actually have that kind of have knowledge on pretty much everything. So like the knowledge sometimes does actually get very siloed, but in order to break those silos, senior devs host sessions weekly, just edu series sessions just for the development team to ask any questions that they have, and everyone is allowed to attend them. I don't really know if there's a need for product managers to attend these meetings, but I mean, I haven't really come across a product manager who would do that, but it's mostly for developers. But any one of the developers are allowed to attend. Some sessions are more structured, where we actually go through the entire code base. One of the senior devs would go through the code base and maybe explain how stuff works there. Others are more like ask me anythings, where people can just ask questions regarding different areas of the platform. But both of these have actually allowed us to de-silo the work. But as far as hosting the sessions are concerned, it's like it's the senior developers' jobs in my opinion. So any of the developers who have been at the company for 10 years and they like to brag about all the knowledge that they have, it's their responsibility to take the time to prepare and host these sessions and mentor other developers. And in my honest opinion, any senior developer that's worth their weight in gold is more than willing to share this kind of knowledge. Otherwise, they may not really be a good culture fit for the team. And that's just something I have to be completely honest with. There's no glory or no, there's nothing to be proud of if you are the only one who understands how the whole system works. It goes back to the idea of being able to, because you're going to get a lot of work thrown your way. And this is kind of where, product managers can jump in and really empathize for developers, because many senior developers don't want to be the only one who knows it all. So you're de-siloing the work that way. And many junior developers want to know more. They want to be able to understand how different areas of the platform work. So you're empathizing for both the senior developers and the junior developers, and understanding what it is that they're looking for, and just having like a common solution for both of them there. Tip number 3, spikes and proof of concept. This one is very, very important to me. So when it comes to spikes and proofs of concept, when it comes to spikes, we always create a proof of concept, and then we allocate time for the developers that worked on the spike to present their findings and collect feedback. And the reason why we do this is, again, it goes back to the empathy argument, because it gives your developers a sense of ownership. After all, they are the ones who are building the app. So it doesn't necessarily make sense for someone to just come in and just say, hey, we have this new technology, we want you to build it. Okay, hold on a second. Let's just see how we can build it. Let's build a proof of concept, and we can present our findings and see if it's actually useful to us. And it gives that developers like a sense of pride to be able to present their learnings and be seen as an expert in front of their peers. In my case, I had I've done quite a few like these kinds of proof of concepts in my career. But one situation that kind of stands out to me is at some point in time I had to rewrite a lot of tests that we had running, and we had the idea of using a different library entirely for our tests. So instead of going through like the 300 to 400 tests that we have and rewriting everything, we built, myself and 2 other developers, we built a very small proof of concept. We understood how the new library worked and how it was different from the old way of doing things, and how it actually was more beneficial. And we did some benchmarking, and we were able to see like the differences in times as far as running the tests are concerned. And once we were able to do that, we presented our findings to our senior devs, to all the other senior devs and the rest of the team. And from there, we were able to get like a sense of, ownership and feel like, okay, we're not being told to do this. We want to do this, okay, because we've seen the benefits to it. And there's other examples of libraries that we've used and SDKs that we've used where we've done the exact same thing. Anytime a new technology comes in, always build you want to use a new technology, always build a proof of concept so that you see if it's actually worth your time to invest, and also see if it's and also give your developers a sense of ownership and pride. So always goes back to the empathy argument there.
Yeah, spike. I just want to add, Zishan, spikes are
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, I've experienced definitely a game changer, right? You can just team can spend just a couple of days, and you can figure out kind of whether you're going in the right direction or not, rather than falling into the build trap.
Yeah.
Whereas product managers, we tend to kind of be in that go 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 mode. It's like, okay, you know what? We don't have 4 days or even 2 weeks for this spike. Like, we just need to build stuff so that we can show stuff, right?
Mm.
And then more often than not, you end up building the wrong stuff for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
Or something that just from a technical standpoint will not work. And you find
Yeah.
that out once you've gotten so far ahead, and it's really hard to
Oh,
go back. So
y-
just want to
y-
echo in that spikes are amazing.
no, 100%. And I think you're actually yeah, you're actually triggering some very traumatic experiences that I had in one of my companies. So I'll share this experience with everyone.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
amazing.
please don't do this, because this is probably one of the most frustrating experiences I ever had. So I was in one company I was working on. I'm not going to mention which company, but I was working at this one company, and we were building this. We were basically building an internal Kanban. And anyone who's ever used like a Trello or ClickUp, they know what a Kanban is, or Kanban,
Yeah,
depending on how you pronounce it. But allows you to organize your tasks. So for whatever reason, we had the brilliant idea of building this internally, and we did our spikes, we did our proof of concept, and I mean, we development team, including myself, we kind of knew what we were getting into, but we didn't actually. But when we try to emphasize on how difficult this was going to be, because if you take a look at Trello, the simplest example, Trello has been around for I think like close to 10 years, and they have quite a few developers. And we were a very small team of like 7 developers, who and it's very difficult to build something that's on that level. So regardless, though, we were pushed to build this thing. We're building it. We're like 90 days into the actual build, the builds, and we're feeling good about it. We have about maybe about like less than 6 weeks left in the in the actual product. At least that's what we're estimating. And then the co-founder of the company, who was a developer at some point in time, he comes up to us and says, "Yeah, we have to wrap all this up in 2 weeks because it's no longer a priority." And I was just like, "Are you kidding me?" Like
wow.
I was so frustrated with that. And that was probably one of the worst experiences that I had. That every developer that I was working with was very frustrated with the situation. We felt like we were let down by management. Maybe not so much by the product manager, but by like the higher ups, because it takes a lot of time to build something like that. And then
Yeah,
when you're building something, and every product manager knows this, when you're building something, you start building something, you want to see it through. So we
absolutely.
weren't able to see that through, and it just didn't really work out for us in that sense. So it was a very frustrating situation. So tip number 4, pair programming. This is not very common amongst a lot of development teams, but I have a lot of experience with pair programming. I've done so much pair programming in my life. So any story that is either a 3 or a 5 requires at least 2 developers to work on. And this is something that we did pretty extensively at Getty Images. And when I say 3 or 5, I'm saying we would often use when we're estimating the work involved for a story, we would use the numbers 1, 3, and 5, meaning small, medium, large. So 1 being small, 3 being medium, 5 being large. So any story that was either 3 or 5 that would require at least 2 developers to work on. And the reason why is because we want to be able to share the knowledge, especially if it's a big feature that like if one developer does it and then all of a sudden that developer is no longer there, we're like, okay, what the hell? Like, what do we do? Like, no one knows how this functionality works or how this story
Yeah,
worked. So we have to
yeah,
share that knowledge. And don't really be concerned with more developers working on one task. I know this may seem a bit counterintuitive, and it sometimes maybe a bit harder to justify to upper management, but it's actually very beneficial to have multiple developers working on very large stories. Those stories that take 2 or 3 cycles, 2 or 3 sprints to actually do. Those are the stories the one story that takes 2 or 3 sprints. Those are the stories that you want to have multiple developers working on. And a very specific example is one story that we were working on, that I was working on at Getty Images. We had 3 developers, including myself, work on it because it was a major refactor of the entire code base. We literally had to go through every single file in the code base and make some changes there. And it did seem very daunting to just one person to do it. But again, that's where the empathy part comes in. When you empathize that just because we're developers doesn't mean we don't get overwhelmed with code. And then if you bring in other developers as well to help that single developer, it helps the entire team, not just the one developer, and really allows them to feel like their voice is heard and they become a lot less overwhelmed. So in addition to the 3 developers who are working on the story, including myself, we had 4 other developers review the code. So in total, we had 7 developers review one story. Okay, 7 developers review one big story that had major changes in it. And that allowed, again, 7 developers to become very familiar with major architectural changes that we made. That is a huge thing to be able to accomplish and say. It's just something to really think about. So pair programming is a big thing, especially on stories that are 3 or 5. For the ones that are like small little changes, maybe you don't need to pair on that, but for large ones, absolutely do recommend it. And the last tip over here is probably, I'm going to say it's my favorite, but it's an important one. Details do matter, especially when you're raising tickets, because tickets have to be, I think they have to be raised more effectively. Developers are very detail oriented, and when you're submitting bug fix requests, always add as much detail as possible to reduce the guesswork. So if you see some errors, while you're using the application, your product rather, report those errors inside the ticket. Take screenshots if you can. Obviously, do some screen recordings if that's possible as well. That's really helpful, and attach them to the ticket. I know ClickUp has that feature, so it's very, very helpful. And this kind of goes back to what I mentioned initially about Chrome Developer Tools. Chrome Developer Tools does actually allow you to see. It does actually have a tab that allows you to see errors that are not visible to the user, which sometimes to a developer can be very, very, very helpful, especially for those bugs that are like occasionally coming up, because it does take time. It does take time sometimes to reproduce a bug when there are no details in the ticket. And this has got to be some of the most frustrating experiences that I've ever had. So again, it goes back to the empathy argument. Empathizing with your developers, knowing that that it does take time out of their schedule to be able to reproduce a bug, especially if there's no issues. If there's no details. And at the end of the day, I've been saying this for about 10 years now. If I cannot reproduce a bug, there's not a hope in hell that I'll ever be able to fix it. So whatever you can do to make sure your developer is able to reproduce the bugs with the reproduce steps, you can see the whatever errors that come your way. That's something really important to keep in mind. And just to kind of summarize, all the tips I just mentioned previously. Number 1, effective warning. Stand-ups. Number 2, de-siloing work. Number 3, spikes and proof of concepts. Number 4, pair programming. And number 5, details mattering. These are all very, very important points that I think can really help you working with your developers. And just some final tips I want to give everyone here. So always ask for clarification. So do not be upset if you don't understand a specific term or acronym, and always clarify if the acronym that's said during or even abbreviation, if the acronym or abbreviation that's said during a meeting, if it's a company specific term or if it's an industry term, because obviously those will be 2 completely different things. Like AWS, Amazon Web Services, is an industry term. EWS is an internal term. I can't say what it means, but like EWS is a different term that we use internally. So AWS and EWS, it's very easy to get those 2 confused, but that's why you should always clarify. I was actually in a meeting once with about 40 other people and the presenter as well. So the presenter was constantly saying this one acronym over and over and over again. And about 30 minutes into the presentation, I had the nerve to raise my hand and just say, "Sorry, can you explain to me what this acronym means?" And I swear, I absolutely swear to God, at that moment in time, all 40 people exhaled simultaneously because nobody knew what that acronym meant, with the exception of the presenter. So don't be surprised if don't be concerned with looking a bit foolish by not asking for clarification. One of my professors back in college, he told me something that has stuck with me to this day. He's like, "You're better off." I don't want to butcher this. You're better off looking like an idiot and asking a dumb question, as opposed to being an idiot and not asking it at all. So this was a quote that was said to me back in 2009. So that was a very slightly different time in terms of culture, but you get the idea, right? Don't be afraid of asking questions. Always document terminology, and do this for terms that you do know and don't know, because I can absolutely guarantee you will forget what a term means in a few months. So I'm sure all of you here have used Slack, or at least heard of Slack. Open up your DM in Slack, your personal DM in Slack, and write down your notes in there. I do it all the time because I, as a developer, sometimes get like 100 different commands that I need to learn that I will only use maybe once or twice a year. There's no way I'm going to remember it the next year. So it's always a good idea to do that. And lastly, this is a very somewhat controversial one that I think a lot of people may disagree with, but I'm going to say it anyways. And this kind of ties back to what I said about technical terms, databases. Learning database queries. I do believe that if product managers were to actually learn one programming language, it would probably have to be SQL and MySQL, or PostgreSQL, depending on what your database is in. And they work more or less the same. There's obviously some differences, but they do kind of do they function. They accomplish the same task. But the reason why I think product managers to some extent should actually spend some time learning SQL is because when you understand how your data is structured for your application, everything else kind of falls into place. Like whenever I'm designing an API, I always start off with the data, and then the API kind of falls into place, and the rest of the app kind of falls into place. So I do believe that understanding how your data is structured is pretty helpful in that respect. But at the same time, every product manager I've ever met is very, very, very data focused. They're always looking at the data. What does the data say? So it's not uncommon for a product manager to come to me and say, "Hey, can you generate some reports? Can you generate a SQL query for me?" And that sometimes that can take time out of my schedule. But if you as a PM do actually have non-destructive access, and that's very important, non-destructive access. I will say it again, non-destructive access to certain databases, you can generate a SQL query that can return the data that you're looking for, assuming you know how the database tables are actually structured. So I do believe that there is some value in product managers learning SQL and learning how databases are structured. Again, controversial opinion. Some people will disagree with it. Some people may actually think I'm spot on here. Regardless of what your opinion is, this is what my opinion is. So I just want to share that. And that is the rest of that is my presentation. I really do appreciate being able to give it, and I'll just open up the floor for any questions here.
Awesome. That was amazing, Zeeshan. I think that first point, ask questions. I mean, one of the advices that I got from my profs as well, along the same lines, if you've got a question, there's a great chance that somebody else has it too, right? So
yeah,
you have that example, that room of 40 people, everybody probably had the same question, right? So don't feel foolish. Ask the question. All right. So speaking of questions, we've got a couple in. I've pinned them. Let me bring them up. They are quite large, but here, let's start with this one.
How can developers talk tech to non-technical product managers like a 5-year-old, and how often is it seen where developers can look beyond ones and zeros? I don't understand what that ones and zeros part is, but what role can a product manager play in creating this bridge? So I'm a bit unsure of the question, because there's like 3 different parts here, but like maybe I can answer them one by one. As far as I do believe that developers should actually play a role in teaching product managers this stuff, because you can't just it's really unacceptable if a developer laughs at a product manager for not knowing something, because like we're not like this. It's 2023. Like we're not here to make anyone look stupid or feel stupid. Like if developers are doing that, we have to actually change that culture. And I'm very vocal and unapologetic about it. So like get your stuff together if you're a developer who does that. But I've always found, I mean, going back to my first conversation with my product manager, I just drew out on a piece of paper how version control works. So, and for me, I'm a very visual learner, so I think that's actually a pretty good way of doing it. At the same time, try to actually come up with some analogies. I use quite a few analogies in my course and even in my content when I talk about APIs. So I think APIs. I think that that analogies there are really helpful. So that's one thing to actually do. But I mean, try not to stick with just like the explanation for a 5-year-old. Try to actually get beyond that as well if you're a product manager, because from what I've been told, like a product manager has to have like they should have an explanation for multiple personas. One being like a small child, the next one being your developer, and the other one being a non-technical senior manager. So try to have try to come up with an explanation, or at least work with your developer to come up with like those 3 kinds of explanations, and kind of build your knowledge from there. And how often is it seen where developers can look beyond ones and zeros? I don't fully understand that question. Perhaps someone could clarify. What role can a product manager play in creating this bridge? Just again, like starting off with like just making an effort to ask your developers, or I don't want to say follow my content, but like I follow people who are doing this kind of stuff and teaching this kind of stuff. But visually is the best way of learning for me, and I found it to be very helpful for others as well.
Yeah, I think the middle part, if I try to decode it, it's basically trying to ask like, how can developers try to be not technical when talking to a product manager, right?
Okay.
Or try to be less technical. Try to make it easy for product managers who are not technical.
Yeah, it's always tricky because it's hard to explain something. Like for instance, I can explain an API with some analogies, but to like a 5-year-old. But then once I take it a step further, I have to put in some technical jargon, and I have to explain what each of those what that technical jargon means. And that's why whenever I'm explaining APIs, I try not to really. I have like a few prerequisites before that. Like I'll explain what a client-server relationship is. I'll explain what a server is and what a backend and frontend is before I even talk about APIs. So like there are, in my opinion, some prerequisites that you have to give as a developer before you explain what something means. So anytime you throw some jargon in there, please try to step back and please try to step back and try to explain the jargon as well, as opposed to just throwing it out left, right, and center. So hopefully that gives some sort of an explanation there.
Gotcha. Awesome. We got a question from Chase Tilton. So to dive deeper on REST APIs, are there further concepts than the ones that you
other further concepts that you should know regarding REST APIs? Well, I mean, you can learn about like GraphQL APIs, and I actually have a post. It was one of my more popular posts where I compare GraphQL to REST API and what the differences are, and why some people find what problems GraphQL was actually solving for REST. So it doesn't hurt to further your knowledge on APIs. But the concepts that I mentioned, like the list of terms that I mentioned, request, response, payload, query string, those are pretty universal, I would say, and they that tends to make up the majority of what I guess like most product managers should know about APIs. And that's actually what majority of my course is actually focused on. And from there, you kind of just build a knowledge on top of that. So I don't know if I really answered your question there, Chase, but I think like the ones I mentioned, the list that I mentioned in the previous few slides, that is a pretty solid start that you can always build on top of.
Okay, we've got time for one last question. Let's bring this up. So Atul asks,
how do you suggest POC is a proof of concept? I don't know all the acronyms. So how do you suggest proof of concept should be created if it's taking time from the sprint velocity when we are not sure whether proof of concept will yield expected results or not. I've seen that proof of concept itself is time consuming sometimes, and it feels that we should have, and it feels that we should have work. Okay, so yeah, this is there's no real way around this, Atul. The fact is that, like, if you are going to be building a proof of concept, that is going to be taking time away from other work as well. Just like how when a senior developer has to give a presentation, like every few weeks or whatever, maybe it will take time away from their existing sprint. But I would actually suggest that the product manager focus on the benefits of this proof of concept and the benefits of getting things right. Obviously, there is a bit of a risk involved. But the biggest risk of all is not doing a proof of concept and just implementing something like a new tool or new technology, and then now you're like neck deep in water and you have to revert everything back, because that will take 10 times as long. The whole process will take 10 times as long as in comparison to just the proof of concept. Like a week or so, or 2 weeks or so, that may take to build a proof of concept. That's a really small amount that you may not always be able to justify that to upper management. Hey, like these two developers are building a proof of concept, they're pairing together, so they're not going to be able to take on this work. But you kind of have to give a bit of pushback to upper management, and sometimes it helps to have the lead engineer in that conversation as well, so that they can understand that there is some cost benefit to doing this, to taking some to I guess like slowing down. And understanding what it is that you're getting yourself into before you dive headfirst into it. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to get out. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Awesome. Zeeshan, this was amazing. I personally think you're doing God's work because, I swear, all product managers struggle with this, right? And we have this fear, some kind of overcome it, but there's still, deep down, there is that fear that, hey, yeah, what if I'm not technical enough, right? Now, how much do I really need to know? You always feel like there's always more you should know in order to be a better PM. So this was super helpful. I think that the way you broke it down, it's really easy to digest, and that was fantastic. So Zeeshan, on behalf of our product community and the product Soch team, thank you so much. Again, that was super informative. We'd love to have you join us again on another topic in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely happy to.
And awesome. And just a couple of quick announcements before we leave, folks. So our in-person Soch cafes are continuing to happen. In fact, we had one in Islamabad and Karachi this past week. Make sure to register and attend for the one in your city. Currently, we hold Soch cafes in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad every month. It's a great opportunity to engage with others on topics that are relevant to us as product managers, as well as having the opportunity to network. And then second, our YouTube channel is growing. So if you've missed any of our previous sessions, you can always check out those by searching for Product Soch in YouTube, including this session. You can find this one. If you tuned in late, you can catch up on this. So again, thank you, Zeeshan, and to all of you for joining us. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you, everyone.